Begin today the Gemara on Daf Pei Gimel Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom of the Yamud, right after the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, one of the cases that was brought was that a person sells wheat. So the first case of the Mishnah was that he sells wheat yafais, good quality, and it turns out to be bad quality, meaning that the buyer got deceived. So then the buyer could back out from the sale. If it's the opposite, if he said he's selling bad quality and it ends up being good quality, so over here the meicher is the one that got deceived, so he can back out from the sale. That was the halacha of the Mishnah. Okay, so based on this, the Gemara is going to bring another halacha and then see if we can learn this halacha out and compare it to what it says in our Mishnah. Amar Rav Chisda said, Machar loy shaveh chomesh b'sheish. A person sells something that is worth only 5 and he sold it to him for 6. So this is, you deceived him and you charge him a 1/6 more than what its price is. What's the halacha when you charge a 1/6 more? That the buyer could back out and he gets his money back. Now, and then, v'hukar v'amad al shmaina. In the end, what ended up happening is this object actually went up in price and now its value is actually 8. Meaning that now it turns out that's the seller that got paid less than what its price is. Now, the Rashbam explains that we're talking about over here within a certain time frame. The halacha is, as we learned in Masechta Bava Basra, after the sale, and if this buyer got deceived, he has a certain time period when he can come and back out from the sale. And the time period usually is as long as it takes for him to take this object and show it to another merchant that will point out to him the mistake here, that he overpaid. But once it's after that time period, you can't back out. So what the Gemara is talking about over here is within that time period when the buyer could still back out because he was overcharged, but in between what turns out is that now the price went up and it's now worth 8 and he only charged him 6. So minis ane likeyach. Who's the one that originally got deceived here? The buyer. He was overcharged. He was a 1/6 more. So likeyach yachalach zabai. Only the buyer could have charata. V'loy meicher. But the seller cannot have charata, even though now the seller says, look, now it's me that's getting deceived over here because now it's worth 8 and I'm only charging you 6. But he can't have charata because of what developed now. Because the buyer says to the seller, Ilu loy nisan. If you have not deceived me, the fact that the price changed after the sale, you wouldn't have the ability to retract from the sale. Now that you came and you were ma'anim me, you deceived me, and therefore I have the option to back out from this. That should also give you the ability to come and back out from the sale because it went up to 8. So therefore, in such a case, you can't back. Only the buyer that originally got deceived could back out, but not the seller. Okay, Tosfos over here says that the Gemara uses the example of when he was deceived the 6th, because then you can't back out. It's not a mekach toas mamish. It's not the whole sale is null and void. It's that the buyer can tell the seller, give me back that money. That's what the Gemara is talking about. And in such a case, the buyer can back out, but not the seller. But in a case where it's a mekach toas mamish, according to one pshat and Tosfos, so then in such a case, then both of them could back out because the whole thing is a mekach toas. But Tanatune says the Gemara, what it said in our Mishnah is a raya to this halacha of Rav Chisda. What did the Mishnah say? Yafais v'nimtzurois. You sell good quality. You say that you're selling good quality wheat, and it turns out that it was bad quality. So the Mishnah says lekeyach yachalach zabai. The buyer can retract from the sale, v'loy meicher, and not the seller. So now the Gemara understands what's the chiddush of the Mishnah. Isn't it obvious that it's only the buyer can back out? He's the one that got deceived. The seller didn't get deceived at all. Elamai, the chiddush of the Mishnah is in such a kind of case where even if afterwards the price went up and now the meicher wants to come and back out as well, it doesn't matter. He can't back out. Since the one that was originally deceived is only the buyer, he's the only one that could back out. Rav Chisda said the same halacha will also be if the case is in the reverse. You sold him an item that's worth 6 and you only charged him 5. And that means that it's the seller that got deceived here. He got underpaid. The huzlu, but then afterwards, within that time frame when you have to retract from the sale, and v'hamdu al gimel. Now the price is only 3. So it turns out that it's the buyer actually that got deceived. He overpaid. He paid 5 when now it's only worth 3. So minis ane, who's the one that was deceived in the sale here? Meicher. The meicher got underpaid. So meicher yachalach sabai. Only the seller is the one that could have charata. V'loy lekeyach. The buyer can't have charata. The amalei, because the buyers, the meicher that it says to him, If I wasn't deceived there, if you didn't underpay me, you wouldn't be able to have, you wouldn't be able to retract from the sale. Now that the price went down to 3, and it turns out that you were deceived, so now you want to have charata from this? You go according to the one that was originally deceived, not what happened later. And again, the Gemara says, V'tane tuna. We can bring a raya from what it says in our Mishnah. Rois v'nimtzi yafais. The Mishnah says that if you sold bad, you said you're selling bad quality wheat, and it turns out that it was that the buyer gets good quality. So who's the one that was deceived there? The seller. So meicher yachal achzabay v'loy lekeach. The meicher is the one that can have charata, and not the lekeach. So again, the Gemara understands what the Mishnah must be saying is not just a simple pshat that the meicher could have charata and not the lekeach. Why should the lekeach have charata? He didn't lose anything out of this. He only gained. He only got good quality. The answer is, even in a case where later the price goes down and he ended up overpaying, still it's too late. He's the one, not the one that got originally deceived. It's the meicher that got deceived originally. So therefore, the lekeach cannot have charata, like the halacha of Rav Chisda. So now the Gemara asks on this, if that's the case, that we have, basically, from the Mishnah, we see clearly the halachas that Rav Chisda said. So then, my kamashmala, what's Rav Chisda coming and teaching me with his halacha? Masnisani. So based on what we're saying, this is what it says in the Mishnah. Answers the Gemara, no, it's not a raya from the Mishnah. If it was what it says in the Mishnah, I would still think to say Dilme that Rav Chisda, that maybe in the case that Rav Chisda spoke about, Tarvayu Motzi Hadrubu. Both of them could have charata. There is what happened originally, that for example the buyer was deceived because he paid too much, but then later it turns out that he paid too little, and now the seller was deceived. So we go according to the way it is in the final case, that the seller was also deceived, so he could also have charata. That's what I would say regarding Rav Chisda. And the same in the reverse, when it was originally the buyer, the seller that was deceived. What does it say in the Mishnah? The Mishnah is telling me a different halacha. Here in the Girsa of our Gemara, the Bach takes out these words over here. See over here in the Rashbam as well. Then instead of the next line of the Gemara, he just reads it, Masnisan Hainu Taima. The reason for our Mishnah is Mishum Dechsev. Instead of the line, the whole line here says Hainu Taima. Okay? Hainu Taima, the reason for the Mishnah is Mishum Dechsev, because the pasuk says Ra Yomer Akaina. A buyer always says about everything that he buys, he always complains and says, I got bad quality here. What's the Gemara saying? So the Rashbam explains what the Gemara is saying is that in our Mishnah, it's not talking about a case where the Oina, the one that got deceived, was overcharged or undercharged in the actual price. We're talking about the Oina, which was in quality. So when it comes to Oina and quality, over here it's different. Over here we could say that's why the Mishnah said that only the one that got deceived is able to back up and not the other one. Why? For example, in the Reisha of the Mishnah, when he says that he's giving you good quality, and he only received bad quality. Right? So in such a case, if the buyer wants to back out, he can say, I got bad quality, so therefore he's backing out. But if now, what happens if the seller decides he wants to back out? So then the buyer will come and say, it's not a mistake. Whatever I got, it's good enough for me. The buyer says, anyways, I always complain about things, so I complain that it's bad, but it's really good for me. So therefore, for me, it's not a bad sale. So therefore, there's no reason for you to back out. So in other words, if it's not something which is very clear that there's a change of price here, underpaid or overpaid, so then the buyer which got deceived will always be able to come to say, I didn't really get deceived. And the same thing also in the Seifa of the Mishnah, when it says that the Meicher wanted to sell Rois, and the Nimtzu Yafais, and it turned out to be good quality. So over here, the Meicher is the one that got deceived. So the Meicher can back out because he can show and say that I got deceived over here. But what's if the buyer decides he wants to back out? So then the Meicher will say, no, you didn't get good quality. You got bad quality. I said I'm giving you bad quality, and I wasn't deceived. You didn't get good quality. You really did get bad quality because a buyer that always buys complains and says that it's bad quality, and I know that you consider this to be bad quality, so therefore you never got deceived. So therefore he can play it in such a way that he won't allow the buyer to back out. This is one pshat that it says in the Rashbam. There's another pshat that Rashbam says a little bit different. But the point there is very simple, that in the case of Rav Chisda, because we're dealing with a change in the price, over there it's very clear who it was that got deceived, and therefore over there you say that over there you can say because there's a price change. So maybe now that the price change later was that not only the buyer got deceived, but the seller also got deceived. Maybe there's a svara to say they can both back out. But in our Mishnah, there's a svara to say there's no real actual price change over here. So therefore, the one that got deceived could back out, but the other one, you're not going to let him back out. You're going to say, I wasn't deceived by this. So therefore, you can't compare to our Mishnah. So therefore, Rav Chisda had to teach me this halacha over here as well. Gemara goes back to another case that it said in the Mishnah regarding a sale, shchantis v'nimtze levana chulu, that if you sell wheat and you said that it's going to be red, and it turns out to be white, so it's not what you said that you're going to give. So in such a case, both the buyer and the seller can back out from this. So Amar Rav Papa says about what the Mishnah says here regarding the color, the different colors that there is in the kernels of the wheat. Midiktani levana, it says here that it's white. Shma mino hai shimsha sumkasihi. So from this we see that the sun is red. Teida. Okay, so in other words, what's the Gemara's raya over here? The Gemara uses the lashon midiktani levana. It says over here that there's white and that there's red. So the red that we're talking about over here is there's only two colors of the wheat, white and red. And this redness that there is by the wheat, what is it called? It's called shchamtis. What's this name shchamtis? It has the word chama in it. It's the same name that comes from the sun, which is red. That's why the kernels of wheat that are similar to the color of the sun are called shchamtis, taken from the word chama, the sun. So therefore, based on this, we can learn out that the sun, sumkisihi, the sun is red. Even though during the day it seems like that the sun is white and the light of the sun is white, but really the sun is red. And Teida, I'll prove to you that the sun is red because when you look early in the morning, by sunrise, and when you look at night, by the sundown, so over there you see that it's red. The fact that we don't see all day the redness of the sun, that's because we don't have the proper vision to see the light of the sun because it's so bright, so it doesn't allow us to see the redness of the sun. The brightness takes away from that redness, but really the color of the sun is red. Meisvei, so the Gemara asks on this. It says regarding a nega tzeras, umareyu omeik menaer, that the color when a person has the nega, which is white, and that color of white is on the skin of the person, so it appears to be deeper than the color of the skin. And it says on this that what is this compared to? Kemare chama amukim menatzel. Just like the light of the sun, which appears to be deeper than the light than the color of where the shade is. So here, from this comparison, what do we understand from this? V'hasam lavanu. Kemare chama. Sorry, that's already the answer. V'hasam lavanu. Over here, when it comes to the nega, what color is the nega on the person's skin? White. So from the comparison that it says here, that we're comparing the white in the skin, that it's deeper, just like the light of the sun, it seems like that the sun is also white. So the Gemara says, no, kimarachama v'loy kimarachama. We're comparing the way the appearance of the nega on a person's skin is to the light of the sun in comparison to the shade, but it's not exactly like the light of the sun itself. Similar to the sun, that it appears to be deeper than the place where there's shade. When it comes to the nega, it's white, but when it comes to the sun, it's red, or has a reddish color to it. Now the Gemara asks on this, according to what we were thinking, we were asking here that the sun is white compared to a nega. We see that the sun does have a reddish color to it, both at night by sundown and in the morning by sunrise. Where does that come from? Answers the Gemara, betzafre, in the morning when it's reddish, the cholfa beivardi the Ganeden, because it's passing through the beivardi, the place of how do they translate there? Flowers, or the vardi of Ganeden? What? The rose garden of Gan Eden. And that redness of the Gan Eden is reflected on the sun by sunrise. And Bepanya, the Chalfa Pischa de Gehenim. And the redness of the sun at night is when it passes through the entrance of Gehenim, that's the fire of Gehenim, causes the sun to be red. But the sun itself, according to this, is not red. The Amri, others say Ipche, that it's the other way around, that in the morning by sunrise, when the sun is coming on Mizrach, on east, So there's the light of Gan Eden, which is at Ma'ariv, that is shining at the sun or is bouncing off on the sun. And on the night when the sun is at Ma'ariv, so then the light of Gehenna, which is at Mizrach, is bouncing off the sun. So that's the Havamina to say that it all comes from Gan Eden or Gehenna that bounces off on the sun, but it's not the sun itself. But the Gemara's conclusion here is that the light of the sun itself is red or reddish, and therefore you see that redness in the morning and in the evening. Going back to another case of the Mishnah, it said in the Mishnah, Yayin v'nimtza chaymitz. He's selling someone wine, and it turns out that he gets vinegar. Instead of it being wine, it's wine vinegar. Shneim yechelim lachse behen. So in such a case, it's not at all the item that you said you're going to sell, so then both the seller and the buyer could retract from the sale. Says the Gemara, shall we say the halacha of our Mishnah that the yayin, the wine, and the vinegar are two different things? Follows Rebbe's opinion. V'lei rabbanon, the Tanya, we learned in the Braise, yayin v'chaymitz, wine and vinegar, min echadu. They're considered to be one kind. And this is regarding giving truma. When you give truma, you separate from the produce. It all has to be from the same produce. You can't separate truma from one on another kind of produce, from apples to oranges. So over here, when you're giving truma, it has to be all from wine. It has to be all wine. So Rebbe says the vinegar is considered to be wine as well. The Rashbam here brings it could be another nafkamina for this, the halacha of meide b'miktsas. By a meide b'miktsas, it has to be mimin hataina. That whatever you're admitting to has to be similar or the same quality of what the claim was. So wine and vinegar is considered to be the same. Rabbi Yoimeh shnei minin. Rabbi says, no, it's considered to be two different things. Wine is one thing and vinegar is another thing. So in our Mishnah where it says that wine and vinegar are two different things and you can retract from the sale, seems to be following Rabbi's opinion. Says the Gemara, it's not necessarily only Rabbi. Afilateme Rabbana. Our Mishnah could follow even Rabbana's opinion. At kan lepliga Rabbanan ale de Rabbi. When did Rabbanan argue on Rabbi's opinion? That's only when it comes to Meiser and Truma that we consider it to be within the same category. It's the wine that turned into vinegar and it's not a good quality anymore, but it's considered to be like the wine. Or could Rabbi Law, based on what Rabbi Law said, how do I know if someone takes from all the produce and he takes the worst quality to separate truma for his produce? How do I know that the truma takes effect? Shenema, the pasuk says, "V'leisisu olav chet." Do not have a sin. Ba'arimchem eschel b'mimenu. When you separate the truma, and you separate from the best, you separate the worst. So the question is, now, im einei kadosh, if you take from the very worst and you separate, if you would say that it does that the truma does not take effect, then the sea is chet lama. So then there's no aveda here because you have to redo it anyways. There's no truma here altogether. So mikan, from here we learn out l'tayrim and ara ala yafe, that if you separate bad quality on the good quality of the produce, shetruma se truma, that the truma takes effect. Okay, so therefore here as well, the vinegar, this is wine vinegar, even though it's very bad quality of this wine, but nevertheless it takes effect. That's what the Rabbanan say over here by the Truma. But when it comes to a sale, the Kula Alma, the Mekcha Memke, the Kula Alma, the Ikke de Nichale Bechamre, there are those that want wine, and they don't want wine vinegar. There are those that want dafka the wine vinegar for seasoning and things like that. And they don't want the wine. So regarding buying something over here, it's two different things that you can be buying what you need. Over here, everybody would agree that it's two different things, and therefore you can retract from the sale. A person is selling fruits to his friend. So Moshach, if you sold these fruits and you made the act of the kinyan of Meshicha, when you pull it into your domain, this could be in your private property, or as we'll see in the Gemara, a simta. That's a side area on the side of the Rosh Hashanah where you can pull it into that place. So you made that kinyan of Meshicha, v'loy madad. Even if you didn't measure what the amount of the fruits were, kana, you acquire it. The Rashbam adds to this, it has to be also in a case where they set the price of the sale. Because before the price was set, then you can have charata, because it's understood that if there's no price that's agreed upon, then I didn't make up my mind that I'm buying this or that he's selling it. So if once it was a price agreement and then he made the act of the sale, even if he didn't actually measure the amount of fruits, the kinyan takes effect. Madad v'lei mashach. If the fruits were measured, he put them in a basket and he saw exactly how much it is or the weight of it. And this is all if it's in the basket of the seller, because the buyer still didn't make any kinyan here. But loy mashach, he didn't pull it, he didn't take it into Yerushus. Loy kana, he did not acquire this. Now, if the buyer is smart, so he can rent the place, the space over here from the owner, if it's a place that belongs to the owner, and then he can be kained even without the act of Mashiach, just by after he measures it, and now it's his space, so he's kained like it's his domain, it's his chatzar, and he's kained this. The Rashbam explains that the kinyan of Mashiach, the Gemara talks about this. The Gemara later will point this out, that we're talking about a bunch of fruits that are very heavy. You can't just lift it up. Usually, if it's just one or two fruits, you can just lift it up, hagbah, then the kinyan that you do is by lifting it up. But if we're talking about a basket of fruits or a whole bag of fruits. Sagt the Mishnah weiter, pishton, a person's buying flax from his friend. You don't acquire these flax until you take it, you lift it up from one place to another. If the flax that you're buying is still attached to the ground, and you pull out a little bit of it, then kana, you will acquire the whole thing. The Gemara will explain this. Amar Avasi, Amar Rab Yochanan. Avasi said in the name of Rab Yochanan, Modad v'hiniach al gabi simta. You measured the fruits that you're buying, and you placed it onto the ground. You placed it in a simta. The simta, again, as I mentioned, is that side area on the side of the Rishus HaRabim where there's more of a private area. Kana, you can acquire it over there. You placed it down on this place in the simta, you acquire it there. That was the halacha that Rab Asi said in the name of Rab Yochanan. Now on this, Amalei Rab Zera le Rab Asi, so Rab Zera asks Rab Asi, Shema, maybe, lo shama Rebbe ela b'moedel tech kupasai, that how does the buyer acquire this? Only if it was measured and placed into the basket of the buyer, not on the ground of the simta itself. On the ground of the simta itself, it's still an area that other people could put their fruits there. It's not mamash a private area. So you're not going to be kaina. It's not a proper meshicha. But if you're going to place it into a keli, this is the keli of the buyer, maybe that's the only time when Rabbi Yochanan said that you will be kaina. That's what Rab Zera asks Rabasi. Amalei Rabasi answered on this. Dami Haimer Rabbanon, this one of the Rabbanon, Rab Zera, is compared to Kedloi Gomri Inshi Shmaita, like someone that never learned any halacha ever. Why? Because he said, Madad Latech Kupasai, if the buyer measures the fruits and he places it into his own basket, into the buyer's basket, Mem Rabbi, do you need a special statement of Rabbi Yochanan to say that you would be kaina on this? That in such a case, it's obvious that you're kaina. The Rashbam brings that the reason why Rab Asi asked this question was because Rab Asi's opinion is, once you place it into the basket of the buyer, even if it's in the domain of the seller, but if it's in the basket of the buyer, the basket, because it's in his basket, the buyer will acquire it. So over there's no need to say that you would acquire it. The chiddush of Rabbi Yochanan was, even if it's not in a basket, it's on the ground in the simta, still the buyer will be kind of this. That was his question, but not. The Gemara discusses regarding this. Kibla minay, I like kibla minay. Did Rab Zera accept what Rabbi Yochanan said because of the question that he asked on him, or did he not accept it? Did Rab Zera still hold of his opinion that he could only acquire in the simta if it was placed in a basket? Tashema, so the Gemara tries to bring a raya that he did accept it, because the Omer Rab Yanai, Omer Rebbe, Rab Yanai said in the name of Rebbe, and Rab Yanai was Rab Yochanan's teacher, so he said, Chotzer HaShutfin, Kainin Zemizeh, that when you have a chotzer of partners, so you can be kainer from one another in this place, meaning without any basket, because it's a chotzer that belongs to both of them, and you want to do the kinyan of Mashiach to pull it into your domain, because it's a place that belongs to you as well. It's a partner, so you can do the kinyan of Mashiach here. So, and this a simta is the same thing. A simta is this side area which is sort of open for people there to take their things there. So it's like a chotzer hashutfin, and it says that they're kaina one from another there in the chotzer hashutfin. So my love, don't you think al gabe karka that this means that even on the ground itself, the buyer can acquire there in this place? It's considered to be like his domain as well, because he's a shutaf there. And the same thing with the simta. Answers the Gemara, loy letoich kupasai. Rabbi Yanai, that is, only said this if you're placing it into your basket. And the same thing will be also regarding the simta, that you will only acquire, not if it was placed on the floor, only if it's in your basket. Exactly like Rab Zera asked, and Rab Zera did not accept what Rab Asi said. And the Gemara proves this. It's logical to say this. Because we have a different Amayre that quoted differently in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. The Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Madad, you measure the fruits, v'yiniach agabi simta, and you place it onto the simta loikana. You do not acquire in a simta. So now, kashina adadi, we have a contradiction in Rabbi Yechanan's opinion. Rabbi Asi says in a simta you do acquire, and Rabbi Yaakov says you don't. Elala. So don't you think the way to answer this is Shema Mino, that from here we learn kan b'meidel l'teich kupasai. If the buyer is placing it into a basket, so then you could acquire it in the simta. And kan b'meidel l'gabi karka. But if he's putting it on the ground itself, over there you can't acquire because it's a place that's open for others there, so you can't acquire it on the ground itself. Shema Mino, this is a raya that Rab Zera was right regarding what Rabbi Yechanan said, that it's only if you place it into a kupa, then you're going to be kaina. Now the Gemara brings from our Mishnah, what did it say in our Mishnah? Toshema, in our Mishnah it said, Modad v'loy moshach, that if you bought these fruits and you measure these fruits and you did not do the kinyan of Meshicha, loy kana, you don't acquire the fruits. My love, don't you think, what is it talking about over here in this case when it says that he measured it and he did not do Meshicha? Don't you think it's talking about besimta, that it's in a simta, in the simta itself, and therefore he's not going to be kaina? Meaning if it was in a basket, once the buyer puts it into his basket, then everybody would agree that in the basket you kaina. So it must be that it's not in a basket, but it's just in the simta, and it says that you measure the fruits and you put them down on the ground in the simta, and you're not kaina. So this is like Rab Zera said, not like a basket. Like Rab Zera said that in the simta itself, without a basket, you're not kaina. Says the Gemara loy. That's not what our Mishnah is talking about. It's not in a simta. It's b'reshus harabim. It's in the open place of the reshus harabim over there. You're not going to be kaina. That's what the Mishnah is saying. If the Mishnah is talking about reshus harabim, eimeresha. What's the case that it said before in the Mishnah? Mashach. That if you were meishich, if you did a kinyan of meshicha, you pulled it towards you, and v'loy madad, you didn't measure the amount of fruits that are here. Kana. You do acquire it, but the question is how? Meshicha b'reshus harabim mikanya. The kinyan of meshicha does not take effect in a reshus harabim. It has to be into your pulling it to you in your private domain. Because v'hama Abaye v'Rava, that is the Amri Tarvayu, Abaye and Rava both said, Mesira kaina b'reshus harabim. Mesira is the kinyan that works in the reshus harabim. That's when the seller gives it over to the buyer, or even if the buyer, according to one opinion, just grabs a hold of it. That works in the reshus harabim. Or in a place, in a domain that doesn't belong not to the buyer, not to the seller. But meshicha kaina b'simta. Meshicha is a kinyan that will take place only in the simta on the side. Or in a chatza that belongs to both of them, because this is you pulling it, or drawing it, or calling it into your reshus, but it can't be in the reshus harabim. And v'hagba kaina b'chol makim. When you lift something up, that's a kinyan that works anywhere. So if so, how could you say in our Mishnah that it's talking about the reshus harabim if the Reish of our Mishnah says that we're talking about meshicha? There is no meshicha in the reshus harabim. So the Gemara says it's not a question. My moshach named tani, when it says in the Reish of the Mishnah moshach, what it means is mi reshus harabim l'simta. He was standing at the reshus harabim, but if he draws it and takes it from the reshus harabim into the side, into the simta, then it'll be kaina. So the Gemara still asks on this. What did it say further in the Mishnah? That if the seller is smart, he can rent the place and acquire it even without the act of the kinyan of Meshicha. But if it's in the reshus harabim, miman ogar, who are you renting from in the reshus harabim, that space, to be kaina? So the Gemara says it's also not a question. This is what it meant to say. If he was not in the reshus harabim and he's buying the object from the owner within the owner's domain, then if he's smart, doesn't have to wait to make the kinyan until he'll take it into his property. He can rent the space from the seller right there and be kainah right over there. So therefore, there's no raya from our Mishnah to what Rab Zera said.